Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Dispatches from the Energy Transition. Today, we'll talk about the value of data on demand as we're heading into the backstretch of the year. All Dispatches episodes feature on an emerging technology and the projects that they impact. We have two great guests today. We're happy to share them with you. I'm Robert Cross. I'm the principal of Outfit, the clean tech marketing agency. Been in the industry for almost 20 years. Excited to have my co-pilot here, Lucas Miller, senior engineering consultant for Mayfield Renewables. How you doing today, Lucas?
I'm doing well, Robert. Excited to chat with this group and learn more about data. Just a quick intro for the audience here. Lucas Miller, senior engineering consultant with Mayfield Renewables. Been in the industry since 2017. A lot of my day-to-day at Mayfield is building training curriculum for manufacturers and other service providers in the PV and storage industry, and also working with Robert's team at Outfit as a technical liaison to support some marketing and technical communications work. Like Robert mentioned, we're focused on telling the story behind data and particularly how it impacts procurement today. We're joined by two guests to speak on this issue. First, we have Mike Hall, CEO of Anza Renewables. Mike, we're so happy to have you. Do you want to give the audience a brief intro?
Sure, yeah, great to be here. Robert, seeing your picture, I'm realizing that the hoodie's like a uniform, so that's cool.
How about?
Yeah, so my name's Mike Hall. I started in the industry back in 2002. So back when total US installs of solar were about 1 megawatt or one commercial rooftop. So been here since the beginning. I founded a company called Borrego with my brother in the early 2000s. And we started doing the only thing there was to do back then in solar, which was residential rooftops. And then over 20 years, we ran that business, grew that business, and did really everything there was to do in downstream solar. We had an EPC business focusing on mid and large scale projects. We did operation and maintenance. For a while, we actually did funding and had a small IPP for behind the meter C&I projects. And the thing that we did that was most successful was greenfield development, primarily of community solar projects. We did that for 20 years. It was a fantastic ride, wild ride, which ultimately led us to founding Anza based on some of the things that we learned at Borrego and tools that we thought we'd develop that the entire industry could benefit from.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Ian Fischer, co-executive director at Working Power. Ian, do you want to briefly introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Ian Fischer, co-executive director at Working Power. I oversee project development and investment for Working Power. We're a project developer in the small C&I space. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I've been in the industry, not as long as Mike, but pretty much since 2008 when I got out of grad school, and spent a lot of time running around the country doing clean energy program development. First under the ERA stimulus days, working with cities, states, and counties to set up clean energy programs in a lot of the places that didn't have any kind of programs, right? The parts of the country that had utility infrastructure for utility programs were pretty well set up for ERA, but there were a lot of places that didn't. And sort of through that, sort of found my way into doing project development because there was all this project money flowing out, or money for projects, but not a lot of projects getting developed. So we kind of became project developers out of necessity, and did that originally through working with affordable housers. And affordable housers are sort of used to this sort of complicated tax credit financing structure. We're like, okay, this is similar. We can get these guys on board with this. And so sort of, went from wanting to deploy capital to needing to build projects so we could deploy capital, and finding that building stuff is really fun, if maddening. And yeah, so happy to chat with you all today.
It's great. So let's get right into it. Mike, I'm pretty familiar with Borrego, obviously working with Ryan for quite a while. I also I worked with Randy Batchelor too years back over at Soul Rebel. Something that's super interesting to me, Borrego, the origin story to Anza. Why Anza? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there were, I mean, what happened at Borrego was we had this very successful development business, and in 2020 we started to we began the process of spinning out and selling that business. And around that time, my brother, myself, and a couple of the other executives were thinking about what was the big thing we wanted to do next. And we realized that we came to a couple of conclusions. One was that inside of Borrego, over the course of a decade, we had built these tools around design optimization and equipment selection. And what they really allowed us to do was to move beyond kind of taking the narrow procurement lens of just trying to get the cheapest module or the cheapest battery to actually thinking about what's the highest value decision for the project. So taking into account revenue with production and also differences in install costs, which can be significant across these different products with different form factors and different cell technologies. And so we had developed these algorithms that we used for our own business, and they were actually adding tens of millions of dollars of additional profit to the bottom line. But when we looked around at our IPP clients, very few of them had any of these tools. And so that was a light bulb moment for us of, okay, there's a scalable business to be built here where we can help the entire industry make better project decisions, increase project profits. The other realization, we had done a lot of work at Borrego in lean and using the Toyota production system. And one of the concepts there is any time you spend that's not adding value for the customer is actually waste. And so we looked around at the procurement landscape and realized 99% of the time is waste. People are just chasing information. So that was a second light bulb. So we put those things together, and that became the seed for Anza, which was this idea of a software platform where users can come in. They don't have to waste any time chasing down data because it's all there, but they can also make the highest profit decision for their project by looking at not just cost, but using our technology to look at differences in production and revenue that comes from production and also install cost. So that was the big idea, and it's been really fun and it's going really well.
It's excellent feedback and good to get a good understanding of how we got here. As a founder and starting this company, there's always a vision and there's a thought of how it's going to go. What has surprised you most in the past year that you wouldn't have expected in this in Anza getting up and going?
Yeah, lots of surprises. I think focusing on the customer side and the user side. One thing actually that's been really interesting that we didn't know how it was going to go is just how quickly the suppliers have bought into this way of working. So the way the platform works is there's a supplier side and a user or buyer side. And suppliers have really embraced the platform and as a way to share data with more people faster, but also because the platform gives them data back, and the market being opaque is a problem for both sides of the market. Like suppliers are putting out tons of offers and they don't know why they're losing. And the Anza platform gives them some intelligence about like, hey, how does your product stack up competitively to the rest of the market? And that's really valuable. So that's been one surprise of just how much traction and how valuable we've been to the supply side. The other is just I think we knew that people would get the value of the data and also the value of taking into account production and install cost. But one challenge that I think we're helping solve that we didn't really fully appreciate was just how challenging it is for people within these IPPs to collaborate across departments. So how does the procurement team work with the project finance team, work with the development team to not just get the cheapest module, but actually get the module that's best for the project under the contract terms that are best for the project? We talked to a lot of procurement people, and they want to do the thing that's best for the company, but all they're given is a price target. And so a lot of what we've ended up doing is actually help companies get on the same page regarding what the big objectives are for the project and how procurement can feed into that.
Just stepping back a little bit, I work with several software companies, and I feel in the coming years it's going to play a bigger role in our industry. How does Anza work with product developers, engineering firms that are maybe not as used to integrating software into their operations? Like, what does that look like?
The nice thing about the Anza platform is it's pretty simple to use. And I think in terms of getting up and running, it doesn't require significant integrations. I think as we go forward and we build the platform and it becomes more and more an enterprise solution, we'll build those integrations. But right now, you can get started using Anza with probably no tutorial. It's pretty intuitive, and you can put a project in just by answering the wizard questions, get data, get the market intelligence, within 5 minutes. So it's really built for ease of use. It's not a highly technical engineering tool. It has the ability to really get into the technical weeds, and you can pull a lot of data out. But to just get started and get a view of the market, I often use, even though it's a B2C product, I often use the kayak analogy. To get started with Anza, your first experience, it feels a little bit like kayak, like instead of going to a bunch of different airline websites or calling a bunch of airlines, you can log in and you can see every flight that meets your requirements. Anza does the same thing, and it's about as intuitive to get started. There's lots of stuff under the surface you can dig into, and engineers can get a whole lot of data out, but just to get started, it's pretty easy.
Great. I know it's a fairly robust platform, Mike, and you've alluded to maybe a couple different user profiles, right? Not only a supplier, but a purchaser, a procurement manager, let's say. Could you give us just a brief overview of what that user experience might look like from those various perspectives? So how would a developer, let's say, engage with the platform, and how may that be different from a distributor?
Sure. Yeah. So the most common use case is a developer, an IPP, likely somebody in procurement, or related to procurement or in a technical role coming into the platform. You'll create a project and you put in some basic information about your project, the size, the location, which is important because that drives a lot of the calculations, the whether or not it's a single axis tracker, when you're actually going to need the equipment to start your construction. And with that basic information, you push go. And what Anza will do is it'll look at every product in the market. And right now, or every product in the platform, which is almost every product in the market, there's 35 plus suppliers. I think today our running count is about 140 modules we're covering. And it'll match who has availability at that volume for your project time. And then what it does is it gives you a ranking. And within that ranking, you can see all the products. It's usually 100 plus products available. You can see the pricing, but the other thing it does is it ranks the products based on total lifetime value using what we call effective dollar per watt. An effective dollar per watt adds together the cost with the value of the production, because all these modules are going to have slightly different production, with the expected differences in install costs, and it bundles it all together. It gives you this one value metric. And so it's a pretty transformative experience, because obviously the alternative right now without Anza is you're calling vendors and trying to get pricing data, you're trying to get product data. So again, it's like that kayak, like that's a pretty classic use case. On the supplier side, suppliers log in, they can update pricing and availability, which is how we get, one of the ways we get so much pricing data. We get over 1,000 price quotes a month, but they can also see, they can't see each other's pricing. We don't disclose any confidential information from one supplier to another, but they can see where in the market their products are with regards to pricing and value and how they're trending. So they can understand like, hey, am I in the top quartile? Am I leading the way? Am I in the middle of the pack? And they can also put themselves in different cohorts. Like, am I a top 10 by volume supplier? Am I a top con cell? Do I want to compare to other top con cell providers? So those are the two primary use cases. There's other modes you can use the platform. There's like deep dives into products with product pages and documentation there. There's a compare and contrast tool that a lot of people use. But those are kind of the high level use cases.
And I know you guys have a huge emphasis on modules in particular, and procurement data, everything a supplier could be looking for on the module side. And it sounds like there's also an emphasis on some energy storage products as well. So could you maybe speak a bit about what the product portfolio looks like on Anza today, as well as what does the roadmap look like over the coming years? Are you hoping to build this out for other balance of system components beyond just modules and energy storage?
Yeah, it's a great question. So today we cover, you got it right, just modules and energy storage. The energy storage platform, it's different but similar in that it's driving. We don't do the revenue side yet because energy storage revenue is so much more complicated than PV, where you're just taking an output and applying a revenue value per megawatt hour to it. But we have this quick calculator for lifetime cost analysis on the energy storage side, which takes into account OpEx and CapEx and augmentation or overbuild strategies. So it's really valuable to developers. Right now, we have an alpha SaaS product. We're planning a full release of the storage product. So we're taking alpha subscribers. We have a full release plan for May. That's in terms of product coverage, that's our 2025 roadmap. In 2026 and beyond, yeah, we want Anza to eventually be the platform that the industry goes to procure every product and service that you need. But it's going to take us a little while, just because building out these data structures which don't exist for all these different hardware components and eventually service offerings just takes time.
And I want to ask a bit about kind of who your main clients are, kind of what's the breadth of the user base here? Is it, mostly residential all the way up to these, front of meter utility scale developers? So who do you see as your main users, and maybe how does the value of this platform change depending on if I'm a smaller scale mid-market developer versus a super large scale, maybe nationwide developer?
Yeah, our clients are actually they're pretty diverse. I would say the one segment where we have almost no coverage is in the residential segment. So we're generally working with customers who are doing projects in the bottom would be like a 0.5 megawatt or megawatt scale. Most of our clients are in the many megawatts or tens of megawatts would actually be a more common customer size for us. Getting up to, we've done procurements up to the 0.5 gigawatt scale, so to service one or more utility scale projects. Within that, mostly IPPs, although we've worked with a lot of EPCs who are doing procurement on behalf of either it's because it's supporting behind the meter projects where the customer is the site owner, or because they're procuring on behalf of an IPP. Yeah, I mean, order sizes range tremendously. In terms of value, the value proposition is different. So we work with some really large IPPs who have a large bench of procurement professionals on their team. And in that case, a lot of the value to them is just time savings. I had a quote from a gigawatt scale developer who told me, yeah, we were able to get from the platform in 10 minutes what took us about 5 months to gather. So time savings is really valuable there. Because they have scale, they don't need to leverage our scale to negotiate pricing. What they get from us, though, is a full view of the market that they can then use to have a data advantage when they're going into their own negotiations. So the bigger IPPs use us differently, and the small IPPs, they sometimes don't have a procurement bench, so they'll use our platform, and then also we have a service offering where we can run procurement processes with or even for clients. So they'll often use our service offering. They'll often want to leverage our buying power to get a better price in the market. And even, some questions that might be easier for the big guys to answer are harder for the small guys. Like even like, okay, who has what? And even like, who do I contact? That's something you get for the platform. Like who's the right person to talk to at this company about this product? So, so there's value across the company size and profile, but it is different.
No, that's a great answer, and yeah, it really sounds like you're covering a broad swath of the industry here, from small to large and everything in between. And with that, we do want to bring Ian into the fold here. Ian, as one of the Anza users, we really wanted to encourage you to join this conversation and tell us a bit more about Working Power and how you guys are using this Anza platform. But maybe to start, just give our audience a little overview about Working Power's origins and what markets you serve.
Sure. So Working Power, we've been around for about 10 years now. We have sort of evolved from our original company name, Urban Ingenuity. We got started in Washington, D.C. And as I was mentioning, we were, doing a few things. We were we set up and ran the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program for the District of Columbia. We were incubated at an affordable housing developer. And so we got into doing project development with affordable housers, and it really discovered that we needed to, but actually liked developing projects. And this is sort of, really in an urban setting. So we're doing, small C&I projects, everything from, 100 kilowatt systems up to now where, our portfolio has projects that are in the 3 to 4 to 5 plus megawatt projects. Some of those are outside of the city, and there are some cities that have enough footprints for those, but generally not in the Northeast. But we tend to aggregate our projects into bundles that get to a big enough size that we can effectively go for tax credits, financing, and procurement and EPCs, and get some of those economy scales. But it's still in that scale that Mike was describing, we're definitely on the smaller end of the users. We started in DC. We've been expanding. We've worked across the Northeast, upper Midwest, have done work in California, Colorado, markets where there are good solar projects. Are now, our pipeline now is about 30 megawatts of projects with partners, including some ones in the South. Now we're looking at Texas, which is a whole other proposition, and New Orleans. And what drives our projects is we go, having learned how to become project developers, we realized it's really hard, especially at these smaller scale projects. I mean, it's hard, period. And we came at it from a community economic development focus. And so we partner with community organizations, so maybe a nonprofit, maybe a small contractor or developer that just doesn't have the capacity to take on projects at the megawatt, 2 megawatts, and deal with the tax credits, and sort of historically have had to sell these off to larger developers. And we offer them a co-ownership and co-development model where we'll do as much of the work as they want us to, but we bring them into decision making, we bring them into the ownership, and then we try to drive as much of the benefit as possible back into the community. And so, we, to sort of support that, we've raised a bunch of funds. We have a couple of investment funds that we use for our projects, from various impact investors, program-related investment, and other sources, just trying to be as efficient as we can with the capital so that, again, we can direct more benefit back into the community. And then, of course, we look at good, where are there good, strong solar policies? Where can we, take advantage of a long fixed, an attractive feed-in tariff, or where are the renewable energy credits strong? Any place where we know that sort of combination of factors allow us to again, have an efficient capital stack, and then, that we pay off investors, but then also make sure that there's benefit, tangible benefit delivered to community. And yeah, I get that's sort of who we are and sort of what we do. And happy to take it wherever you want to go in terms of sort of how we interact with Anza and other stuff. But today,
Ian, my background prior to energy was finance as well. I would imagine that your acumen there probably seeing Anza, you probably presumed the benefits even before using the tool. What attracted you to using the Anza platform?
Yeah, I mean, there was a number of them, and you know, we are a smaller shop. We don't have our own procurement business, so you know, that was one of the things where early on we were very reliant on our EPCs to do that. But as we got into doing larger and larger projects, we felt we could be more efficient by taking on some of the procurement, sort of breaking apart the engineering and the install from the procurement pieces, and making sure that we're trying to get as much value as we can out of these projects, especially given our mission. And so that was really attractive. Like, okay, we don't have a procurement shop, and that can support our ability to actually do that, to go to market, so that I don't have a dedicated person who's doing all those calls. I want to be able to get market information. I want to understand pricing. Again, one of the things we had talked a bit about, we're in these urban environments that oftentimes have space constraints. And so we're trying to optimize within a footprint. We only have so many square foot that we've agreed to on a site license or site lease. And so, we really need to think hard about, okay, which panels are we using and what is the production of them, and how do we maximize that? So we see a lot of value in being able to sort of run scenarios and understand, okay, what is this system going to look like? And then there's always often wild cards from, we lease property from private companies, but a lot of government entities, and all of a sudden you have a design and you thought you're good to go, and they say, oh, our insurance said that you need the setback to be 8 feet, not 4 feet. Okay, we got to redesign. And so that kind of pivoting is sort of part and parcel to our work, and the tool helps us sort of evaluate those changes as we're laying out design, sort of pairing that with equipment. Going beyond that, as everyone knows, right, there's a sort of shifting landscape, but there's all of the Buy American provisions that are coming along, domestic content adders. So understanding, having a sense of, and Anza has because of their sort of touch of the market, able to really sort of address that and think about, okay, how do you actually evaluate these products with those considerations in mind? And then there's just some basic logistics stuff, like, okay, well, then we order everything and we're going to get it to the site. The logistics of actually being able to accept panels and get them there when you need them are sort of, all of these things are sort of pieces we don't have in-house. So Anza is really attractive for those purposes. And we're just really starting to get into that now with them as our, sort of our next batch of projects go forward. The one that's up here is one that's basically done. And I thought, the before and after with panels on, it's always nice to show.
It's a lot of, go ahead, Matt. Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's great to hear, from you, like how we've been helpful. But yeah, Ian, just it seems like you guys really understand, because you've been doing it a long time. But when you're doing these projects that aren't utility scale, they're megawatt scale, but they're not utility scale. And like right before this call, I know you were like negotiating a lease. There's so much work that you guys put into these deals. There's so much transaction cost embedded in here. Then in the end, it's about like, okay, how do you get as much return out of these deals that you've invested so much in? And the issues around like, okay, how do we get more kilowatt hour production out of a space constrained site? How do we deal with the setbacks? Like on the small deals, those optimization questions are so meaningful because the transaction cost is such a high part of the deal structure. So you guys really get that, and I think you're out ahead on it. And it's probably also partly why just trying to maximize that the kilowatt hours out and the revenue out for your investors on these small deals, probably partly why you looked at taking some of the procurement back, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made an interesting point in one of our conversations, where it's not about just the cost, right? Like, obviously we want the most cost effective panels, but if we can produce more production and we're trying to squeeze that out, like it's more about efficiency of production. And so, yeah, we're happily, if it costs me an extra cent to produce 3 extra cents of value, then I should pay the extra cent. I'd be happy to. And so again,
yeah.
We're not doing we're not trying to go we want to go fast. We want to be as efficient as we can, but again, the optimization is a little bit more critical at the sort of the scale we're dealing with.
Mike and Ian, you're hitting on a big topic, and obviously Mayfield is focused on distributed generation, particularly in the C&I mid-market segment. So, Mike, from your lens, I know utility are operating at scale, like giant systems, giant costs. Where does Anza really excel in the C&I piece that we're kind of highlighting here?
Yeah, I think with the C&I projects, there's a couple of things that are different about them besides just the scale. So one thing that's typically different, whether you're in C&I or even if you're doing community solar, is that your revenue, the amount that you're going to get paid per kilowatt hour or megawatt hour, can be meaningfully different than what you're getting on a typical utility scale project. It can be 200, 300%. And so what that means is every kilowatt hour is more production. And so the additional value of paying up for a more expensive cell is totally different than it is on a utility scale project. And it's even more important that you optimize that. So for C&I developers, a lot of what we're doing is helping them understand, hey, how much more should you pay for, a year ago was a TopCon module versus a mono perk. And then now it's coming to be, how much more do you want to pay for an HJT cell versus a TopCon cell? And then even within those technology families, hey, how much more are you going to be willing to pay for a module that has, even within that cell family, better production performance with a hotter pan file and better parameters? Or how much more should you be willing to pay for a module that has form factor or stringing that's going to be cheaper to install, because the installation costs are typically per watt much higher on these systems? And so just dialing in the decision to the optimum is just more and more important on these smaller projects than on the bigger projects, where there's kind of lots of room to eat up, non-optimal decisions. You usually got extra land, like your economies of scale on the install are such that it's smaller differences, but the revenue contracts are lower. But on these small projects, especially with the high transaction costs, you really want to squeeze out everything you can.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrased that, Mike. And I think from Mayfield's perspective as a third-party engineer, we've focused a lot in the last year or two on a lot of that kind of risk aversion, opportunity cost minimization. And for us, it's come more from the engineering perspective, right? So what that looks like on our side is more performing detailed feasibility studies, let's say, for the early stages of a microgrids project development, maybe even to help with grant funding, but just to determine what's possible, what are the constraints, what are the costs that maybe we're not considering. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels here from our lens as just an engineer to your side of things, more on the procurement and supply chain side of things. Is that a fair summarization? Do you see any parallels with regard to risk minimization on your side to the engineering side?
Oh yeah, totally. And that actually is a lot of what we enable. So if you're on the Anza platform, you can go and grab all the data and the supporting documents you need to do some of that work up front. For example, ultimately, I imagine, Ian, this is the case for you. It's, definitely the case for the larger scale developers. Debt and tax equity are being put on these projects, and they're being underwritten to a certain production number, and that production number is being vetted by a third-party engineer that's probably employed by the financiers. And so, what can happen is at the end, when you're going to finance and they're calculating like your debt service coverage ratio, if the third-party engineer is getting a different production number than you had put in your model, then that can affect your financing and maybe the size of the debt instrument you can get. A lot of what we're enabling users to do is to say, hey, I can get out ahead of that, because even just with the Anza platform, we give you what we think is 99+% agreement with the production number that you should get from that independent engineer. And then if you ever want to do your own PV sys runs, you're not going back and forth with 100 suppliers. You can just download the pan files and all the necessary information you need to do that stuff yourself up front. So I think there's other areas of risk, like whether it's structural risk, mechanical risk on the module itself. Again, all that data is available so that you can try and get out ahead of those things. There's another element of risk that's not engineering that we think is really valuable, that we see people kicking the can down the road too far on, which is contract risk, contract terms, and the allocation of risk in contracts. That's another thing that we've done through the platform, is we've taken the standard supply contracts from all the suppliers, and we've taken the key terms and put it into a database. You can filter, sort, and view how these different vendors are looking at allocation of risk in the contracts. So that's another risk item we try and pull up front for the users.
Ian, as a project developer, you're trying to mitigate risk and use capital most efficiently. As you head into the new year and thinking how you use Anza in the work, what are you excited about from a development perspective as you're kind of learning your way through the platform and using it in your work?
Yeah, so good question. We just really started working with Anza this summer, and so what's exciting is that the projects that sort of were in that sort of earlier pre-development stage that hadn't, stuff that was already building. So being able to take it and actually apply it into actual projects that go on the ground, that there's something satisfying about that. But it is a lot of these things that we're talking about, given sort of the potential shifts in the market, the potential for tariffs and other things. I think it'll be useful. I think it's going to be really helpful to us to just have the best market intelligence, right? When the last round of tariffs came in, and there was that big sort of slowdown in the market, just froze up for several months. We just didn't have a great source for okay, what's happening and what to expect and how do we deal with this? And so I think there's, one of the things I'm thinking about is, okay, we know this is going to be hard to deal with. But being able to have Anza to work, someone who actually knows, just this is the market you're living all the time and you have a much broader view. Again, for us, that's immensely valuable. And again, not to say that it's not going to be that there could be some challenges, but development always has challenges. So to the degree that we have information and partners that can help us be informed and guided, that's something. Excitement is not the right word, but I'm glad that it's there. It'd be nice if everything was just stable and we could just,
Yeah. The changes are tough, but how do you navigate them? What's the easiest way to navigate them? Yeah.
Whether you're a product developer or an engineering firm, the market intelligence and the tools probably become increasingly important, right? Because the scale of development, the complexity with energy storage, it's not getting easier, so to speak. So how you use your tools and service providers becomes more and more important as we go along here in the industry.
And Ian, could you walk us through, we have some numbers on screen here, community benefits, looking at a 25-year time scale. Is this an example of a project from Working Power, or can you speak maybe more broadly to what these numbers are signifying?
Oh, yeah, sure. This is one of our project pools. And so it's actually, I think that's two different systems. And we're right in the design phase now, so that Anza will be sort of central to this. I'll talk about more at that moment. But basically, there's a local nonprofit partner that sort of approached us, had heard what we were doing with some groups in New York City. This is a group upstate. And they said, their nonprofit trains urban farmers. And they said, hey, we think we could get we want to do solar, and we want to use the solar to help us pay for training urban farmers. I thought that was a pretty cool sort of reuse of the sun. We're all farming. So basically, we've helped them to raise some grants. The nonprofit, we brought them into a joint venture, and we're building these systems. It's going to provide, a big chunk of savings to, it'll be community solar. And so residents of the community will be able to sign up. They'll get, 20% energy savings. And over the 25-year lease, that's sort of the total value of the savings. And then the community partner, because they're an owner, they get equity returns, right? They put in some money, we've helped them raise some money. And when you become an investor, then you have the right to the returns, should we do the project well. And so that's sort of our estimate of like what will then, in addition, get plowed back into a local business that's, providing real good value. And then the leases on public land are, city-owned land. So the city is taking, a lease payment. They've actually decided they could take a slightly lower payment in exchange for providing deeper benefits to residents. So, the pie, we try to get the pie as big as possible, and then we can allocate it out. And so that's just sort of how we like to think about it. And this is, the investors that we work with care about sort of hitting all of these. They want their return as well, but then they want to also see that these benefits are also getting achieved. And, we're serving real people and helping keep some of the money sort of reinvested in the community. So that's one of our typical projects, but the project is really cool. And so from an engineering perspective, one of the pieces of this project is going to be a floating solar. It's our first one. So there's like a new engineering challenge, and like I have been following it on email, but there's back and forth now on like what panels to use and how that influences it. And like we are very, very interested and concerned about what does the actual production going to look like, because in theory it's a lot higher on a floating array, but unlike rooftops, there's just not the same track. Everyone knows what a rooftop system in Westchester County is going to produce if it's designed right, more or less. This is a little bit different. So we are spending a lot of time thinking about that, because all of those benefits are going to derive from our actually hitting our production. And so we want to make sure that is very well thought through.
Do you have any experience with photovoltaics, Mike? Any insights into production on the water versus on the roof?
I'd be lying if I said I did. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years. We've looked at it. We almost did a bunch of projects and never have. I think candidly, the platform doesn't like with people, if you're a subscriber to the platform, it doesn't have an option for photovoltaics, but we have a team of 63 people. A lot of what we do is helping customers go beyond the platform into these types of questions and, helping to run this analysis. But other than, what Ian said, which should be better because it should be nice and cool. The modules don't like the heat. I don't have much more than that. Yeah.
Right. And that's one thing that's been nice, is that I know our team is using the tool, but also getting, nice feedback from your team, which is, again, right, like in any development project, there's just loads of different things coming on. I mean, there's questions about panels on a floating array. You don't want stuff going in the water. So they're like, okay, how are these things, what is the material that these panels are made, like encased in, right? What just because people want to make sure that the drinking water supply is protected. And like, so those are knowable things, but it may not be something that has been thought of, we've thought to ask before, but now we need to ask it. So.
Yeah, and for those types of questions, a lot of times we have a really deep bench of technical experts on the products, and also people that we brought over from Borrego who have experience with system design issues. But also a lot of times we're acting as a gateway. Like there's a question here in the Q&A about halt testing and TopCon and the p-val results on the UV degradation, like, which I'm not, I know enough to be dangerous. I did a visit to the p-val lab 6 months ago, and we talked about these results, but we have people who know a lot, and also we have a partnership with p-val, so a lot of times we're a gateway to other sources of data, other providers who are even deeper experts on these issues. So, in the case of photovoltaics, and you're like, okay, what's the most robust encapsulation that we can get from the market? We can often be a gateway for our customers, both in terms of who are the vendors and also who are the providers who have the deepest knowledge in this very specific niche area.
Mike, out of curiosity, is data intelligence, knowledge, is power. You have a software tool, a software platform. And how do you balance the development of the software tool versus ancillary services? Like, what does that look like? Because I know that's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the core issues we have at the management level of the company is how to balance those things. And what I think where we've come around to is, and what I mostly tell customers now or potential customers is, look, start with the platform, because the platform is a transformative experience. It's night and day from what you're doing now. You're going to be able to log in and see the whole market and get in minutes what was taking you weeks and months. And then let's figure out where the thresholds are. Where else do you need help? And then we can talk about what does that look like and how can we help you there with professional services. And we have a few package offerings, but like anybody's going to be able to self-serve a whole lot more just starting with the platform. And so we've kind of matured to that state where I think for a long time we were really having trouble kind of matchmaking. Okay, what's the package of services you need? Is the technology enough? And now I'm like, you know what? Start with the technology. Maybe very quickly we'll get into a professional services engagement. Maybe you have a need right now or you need to procure next month, and like working power, you don't have a deep bench of people, and we'll jump into it. But you can self-serve a lot. In particular, if your company, if you even have somebody half-time on procurement, I do usually advise, like, hey, get in there, start seeing what you can self-serve, and then we'll definitely go from there and give you additional help. Like, just, for example, question that a lot of people are struggling with is domestic content, whether it be trying to be proactive against future tariffs or trying to use the adders. You can log into the database. I think we have all the data on who is willing to take POs for domestic content as a function of future quarter. I was just looking, like, mid 2016, we have 17 different US made manufacturers making US made modules. 8 of those have a US made cell. And that number has been going up steadily, month by month. And so to be able to track down, hey, who's willing to take POs for domestic content in 2015? Who's willing to take it in 2016? What is the pricing? What's the price premium? And who do I call? Like, that's pretty tough without something like Anza.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, Mike, that we did get a question here from Travis relating to domestic content. I know we have a case study here that relates to another question from Travis with regard to module trends and perhaps moving away from mono PERC or TOPCon to HGT or heterojunction technology modules. Before we get there, maybe I know we have a case study that maybe touches on a few of those topics here. So would you mind just running us through kind of what we're looking at on the left here and what the outputs of this case study were?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was an example of a procurement that a customer was going through, and they had been focused on the lowest price module, which is, the most common thing that procurement professionals do. That's usually the target that they're given from management. Go get the cheapest module that meets our risk criteria, vendor counterparty risk criteria. And so they had identified a module using some of our data that was low cost. We engaged with them on the procurement and actually got into their project, looked at their revenue contract, looked at their location so we could do the production and install cost modeling. And what we realized was that by going from the mono perk module that they had selected for low cost to a TopCon product that we ultimately recommended and they bought, while the module is actually a penny more expensive, we estimated that it would save them 1.6 cents per watt on install cost, and the production benefit was pretty massive for their particular PPA contract. That was extra production is worth 3.8 cents. And so just like Ian was saying this customer spent an extra penny to get 4.4 cents of net value, so like 400% increase. And it's really hard to be able to do this math, to be able to see it like this without using the Anza engine, because you need to be able to rapidly run production and install cost models and have all the technical inputs and the pricing inputs to be able to do this. So this was a really common calc that we were doing for customers, 6-12 months ago. Now we're starting to the participants' question, we are starting to see more and more HJT products in the market. And so now this math is being done more from TopCon to HJT or within the family of HJT products. And in particular, when you're looking at, projects probably similar to most of what Working Power is doing, where the revenue contracts look more like retail rates. If you're not doing this math, you could be leaving a whole lot of money on the table.
Ian, as a project developer with a unique business model, what is your vantage point on domestic content from your perspective? And how does it figure in your procurement decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we haven't yet gotten a domestic content adder. We've done some of the other adders. And so this next round of projects, we're sort of working through it to see if we can achieve it. Because we have projects that, they're not simple installs. They have, they're not simple ground mounts. We often have lots of, we end up with like lots of steel in some of them where we're going up on top of a parking deck, for example, and that can affect things. Would love to achieve it. I'm not sure yet if we're going to be able to, but certainly something where that extra adder would, that would be a big benefit.
It's kind of stepping back more broadly, and I'll kind of open this up to the room. The IRA, obviously the transition in the new year, but just irrespective of the transition 2 years in, how would you surmise what the IRA has done for the industry? Just simply put, in your own words. You can start, Lucas, if you want.
I mean, I'll turn it to these guys as a Mayfield representative. We're kind of in the middle, right? So we're not necessarily the developer with the boots on the ground constructing these systems, but we certainly see the effects of just more projects getting installed, certainly more demand for PV storage and microgrids on our side of things. But yeah, curious from your lenses, Mike and Ian, how you see things.
I mean, there are places where it seems really clear that it's helped and you can almost quantify it. Like, for example, when I say, hey, mid-2006, there's 17 companies selling domestically made modules and 8 selling domestically made cells taking orders today. That's 400%-ish increase from where we were pre-IRA. So it's hard not to directly attribute that increase to the IRA. The other thing is there's just a lot more capital and enthusiastic capital flowing into the space because of the long-term commitment from the IRA, the absolute economic commitment, but also the long-term commitment. And where we see it is in the customer base. there are hundreds of additional developers and IPPs serving different niches in the market, hundreds more than there were, 3 years ago. So, some of that proliferation was already happening, but the IRA has been, fuel to the fire to just grow the industry and grow the market participants and grow, um, the number of companies that can raise capital that deploy projects and accelerate the adoption of renewable energy. So it's been really exciting. And in some ways, no matter what happens in the new year, there's so much inertia and momentum that we expect to continue to see. There'll be bumps in the road, but continue to see growth.
Yeah, a few thoughts on sort of how IRA has affected sort of where we sit in the market. I agree with what Mike says, right? Like the ecosystem for clean energy, for solar development has really grown, and it was much smaller, and we draw a lot of parallels in the space that we particularly sit into, affordable housing, and how that space expanded with CDFIs and local developers and saying, okay, we need to do the same thing if you want to have community developed projects. So I think the IRA really helped projects of the type that we do, like, just makes them more viable. The tax credits, the adders, some of the money that's coming out. And so we're able to do projects in places that were perhaps harder to do before. There are a lot of places we work that have really strong states to begin with. Those states are smart, and they actually adjust their state programs to react to the federal. So, they still will have a good deal, but over time, they'll balance it, right? They'll balance the state incentives. One of the things that we were seeing, we're starting to see projects in places that were perhaps not viable a few years ago, starting to be, okay, we can make something work here. And so I think that's one of the places you may see sort of some potential pullback if there are substantive changes where some of the states, just, okay, we thought we could do it, but now there may be not that energy community adder, there may not be, the bonus that we can get to push it over, there may not be that funding for a solar for all program that helps that sort of constellation of certainty of revenue and the capital stack. So that's one of the things, though, that it's really helped. I think, like, it's pushing it into markets that, if you have a more level national playing field, you don't need states to be as sort of out front pushing it, right? We still want the states to have good policies, but yeah.
Great. Well, we're approaching the hour here. I do want to get to one final question. This comes from Drew in the audience. This is for you, Mike. So far, most of our discussion is focused on the developer perspective, suppliers, procurement managers. Are there benefits to manufacturers, let's say, to list their products on the Anza platform? Are you working directly with manufacturers in the process of building out the platform?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a whole manufacturer side to the platform that we actually built with input from the manufacturers. And it's got two sides. One is the ability to give us data about their products, pricing, availability, but also the technical data. The other, which we just released in September, is the market intelligence platform. And so that, I think, does get to the question around, manufacturers don't want to just reduce price, but they want to have a competitive price. They want to win business. So where do they need to price their product to be competitive? The market intelligence platform gives them insight so that the market is less opaque, and they can get, basically real-time insight as to where their different products rank in the market. And so that's valuable. Then the other thing that we will be doing over time is giving them more and more intelligence on the value side. So let's say their product was priced exactly the same as every other one, but given the technical specifications of the product, where does it rank on value once you take into account production and install cost? So we're trying to be really value add for our suppliers. We don't charge them anything for the supplier side of the platform. It's free. And the exchange of value is we ask for your information, and then we give you back a lot of data. And so far, the suppliers have found that really valuable.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ian. I see we're at the top of the hour here. We've got a few key takeaways on the screen here. We will be sharing this recording To the full audience that's here today, we'll send a follow-up email summarizing our discussion, as well as a full copy of today's recording. So again, we want to thank Mike and Ian. Really appreciate the time and insights here. We've got some contact information on screen as well if you do want to get in touch, ask any follow-up questions. So again, really appreciate the time, Ian and Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you all.